All right, so I will now call to order. Sorry, give me 1 second. All right, I'll now call to order the meeting of the Governing Board of the Davis Joint Unified School District. Please note that consistent with the shelter-in-place orders from the governor in Yolo County, this meeting is compliant with the governor's executive order N2920, which allows for a deviation for teleconference rules required by the Brown Act. In-person attendance will not be permitted. Please email public comment to boe@djusd.net. Okay, so we'll begin with a roll call. Trustee Adams?
Here.
D'Annunzio? Yeah.
Here.
Okay. Trustee D'Annunzio?
Here.
Fernandez?
Here.
And Trustee Popengay?
Here.
All right, and Trustee Pickett are all present. Okay, so we can move on to announcement of any decisions made in closed session, and the board made no reportable decisions during closed session. And we will move on now to the approval of the agenda. So trustees, the agenda is before you. Can I have a motion to approve it? Moved by Trustee Adams.
Second.
Seconded by Trustee Fernandez. All in favor by roll call vote. Adams?
Aye.
D'Annunzio?
Aye.
Fernandez?
Aye.
Popengay?
Aye.
And then I'm also aye, so that's 5 in favor, none opposed, none abstaining. And our one item here is 5A, which is the trustee vacancy related matters.
Very good. Thank you, President Pickett. And this morning, staff seeks direction on the trustee vacancy selection process and the other related matters pertaining to that, particularly for the June 25th board meeting. Since we last met, I want to let you know that we received a total of 18 candidate interest forms. The final application was posted to our website yesterday. Will be shared on social media, advertised in Davis Enterprise, and the 18 interested candidates have all been emailed the candidate application form. So staff is eager to hear board discussion as we round out our particulars for June 25th. And any presentation, interview, or other considerations the board would like to entertain in the selection of a candidate.
All right, so let's actually start with our one public comment on this item, and then we can go to trustee discussion and questions. All right, so this public comment is from Roxanne Deutsch, and she writes, "Dear Board of Education trustees, DTA would like to be part of the process in the appointment of Trustee Pickett's replacement on the Board of Education. We have crafted questions that we would like to ask the applicants. Please keep us informed as to the process, when the window of applicants closes, and when we are able to interview. We are committed to finding the best possible person sitting on the board that can address the needs of all of our students and who can best support teachers in their ability and responsibility to address the 3 LCAP goals. Ultimately, it is the teachers in the classroom that will achieve these goals. They know best how to deliver instruction, know how to balance SEL with academics, know what doesn't work, which students are falling behind, which students' needs are not addressed, and what needs improvement. During this time when the inequity of racial justice in our country is being brought to the forefront of global attention, we can't ignore that addressing this in the interview process is of utmost importance. In advance, we appreciate being part of this process. Respectfully, Roxanne Deutsch, DTA PAC Chair." All right, so let's move on now to trustee comments on the vacancy application process. Why don't we just go in alphabetical order? So comments, thoughts?
So I'm sorry. We got an update. So
What issues do we want to address in this discussion today?
An important one would be how we wish to consider every candidate, or if we wish to vet candidates through subcommittee, if we want to hold 1 or 2 board meetings or whatever number is needed, how we wish to hear presentations from candidates, and if the board wishes to ask questions of candidates, those sorts of matters.
Okay, and you as staff don't have a proposal on how to organize ourselves based upon the motion we passed?
Sure. So we have completed the application form, sent that out. It is due Sunday, the 21st at 5 p.m. We will post that on Monday, the 22nd, and the item will come before us on the 25th. The question at hand and what was left for this meeting is in what format the board would like to receive input from the candidates. In the past, that has been a 3-minute presentation. I know one of the questions there seemed to be interest in considering is, does the board wish to interview candidates as well? And how would we solicit questions or not from the community, employees, groups, associations, and others?
I'm just going to chime in and say, from my perspective, and just in terms of running the meeting, I do want us to think about what we can accomplish with 18 applicants, even hearing 3 minutes. So I mean, it'll be an hour of just listening to their presentations if we do it that way, which is fine. It's just we just need to think about. I think we can go more in depth if we. At some point, maybe after that initial 3 minutes, we can narrow the pool. I think I'd rather make sure we have enough time for depth as opposed to just breadth. So that's kind of my thinking in terms of running the meeting.
Cindy, could I chime in on that just to build on that?
Please.
Yeah, so I agree. I think so. John, you had asked the question. Should we have a subcommittee, pre-hand? I think, my interpretation of the board rules is that, that anyone who applies ought to have the opportunity for, to present themselves to the full board. So I'm in favor of that. I am also in favor of what President Pickett is suggesting, which is that we go through an initial process, everybody is heard, and then we, go through an initial winnowing to get down to a group of candidates that then we can then have additional questioning built on things that are submitted to us, and then go through our process that way. I do think that it would be important that whatever questions we ask of that second group, the smaller group, are consistent, so that each person has the same opportunity to address the same questions. And I think for me, the only question is can we do this all in a single meeting, or do we, is it going to require a second meeting to do? And I don't know the answer to that. It may be that we can do it all in one meeting. I think it depends on what other items are on that agenda. I certainly wouldn't want to be having this conversation at midnight with the candidates.
And while we did get 18 interest forms, that may or may not equate to the same number of actual applicants. One area for consideration, and let me ask if Marcy can pull up Board Policy 9223 from the Agenda Online board item. At our last meeting, we did establish the committee which is less than a quorum, consisting of our president and vice president. And part of the role is to help ensure that applicants are eligible for board membership. That's a fairly easy vetting process, and staff can organize all of that well in advance, being a resident, 18 years of age, et cetera, and announce the names of eligible candidates. That will take place via the posting of the agenda item and each of the candidates' applications and resumes posted with the item. The next part is the board shall interview the candidates at a public meeting, accept oral or written public input, and select the provisional appointee by a majority vote. When replacement was sought for Trustee Sunder in the summer of 2018, the interview consisted solely of I think a 3-minute presentation by candidates, if I'm remembering correctly. And that was, I think, a point that came up at our last meeting as to what format that should take. And that's where we would really like to get some direction today. And then second, how do we wish to accept oral or written public input? Is it just through public comment as we normally receive it, or input into questions the board might consider?
So I'll put in my 2 cents worth. I actually think this should probably be a 2-step approach, and I think I'm in agreement with Cindy and Joe that all the applicants should have an opportunity to come in and make a 3-minute presentation. And I'm not sure exactly how we would do this, but I think then there needs to be a process maybe to cut it down to a top 6. And I would argue not to do it in the same meeting, but to have those 6 come back for more extensive Q&A. And some of those questions we solicit from the community to pose to the applicants, and then sort of make a decision whether we select the final replacement based upon what we've done in the past or some other process. But I think it should be a two-step process. And I would advocate to involve the community as much as possible, either through questions or written comments after they've had an opportunity to see the candidates.
Any other trustees want to weigh in?
Yeah, I
Mr.
mean,
Fernandez?
sure. I'll just say, I mean, I think I agree with everything that's been said so far. So it's just a matter of figuring out exactly how to format. But what I'm hearing is that we do give every candidate that has applied an opportunity to address the board. If we do a vote out time for the purposes of narrowing the field, I think that might be, that might serve us best if we want to just pick a number to narrow to, say 5, or I don't know, maybe that's too many or too few. I don't know, but in part it'll depend on how many we get. But I think that we ought to, have a 2-step process, but that in the first step, we should, use the time to try to do some kind of voting at the conclusion of those presentations that narrows the field to a number that, would be more manageable to have a dialogue for the second meeting. And in between, make sure that there's an ample opportunity for the public to engage per Bob's, statement.
Yeah, so after, after the first meeting where the presentations are made, then we get to, basically solicit questions and have them all go to, superintendent, and then, kind of collate those questions, and then, the board members can, choose which questions they want to ask, either based based in part on the input, from those. But I agree with Joe that whatever questions get asked should be asked to the entire slate, or all applicants at that point, just to ensure just fairness.
So if I could weigh in, I agree it's probably going to take a two-step process unless the amount of applications that come in is, less than 6, right? I mean, we have 20 or 18 who have expressed interest, but, we'll see how many actually comes in. The other thing is, I think the community questions, we can probably get a number of them, and it'd be nice if we could kind of distill them down to about 4 or 5 important issues that keep rising up in the public's question in terms of what to ask the candidates, and that's what they would do at the second round, right? And would we want that second round of questions to be where they submit a written response, or would we just ask them to say, here's the questions, 2 days before the meeting, be prepared to present on it?
People may disagree with me, but I think the question should be asked and not really with any preparation.
You mean right there at the second meeting?
Correct.
What do you mean by no preparation?
Well, just, they're not going to know ahead of time what those questions
I
might be.
see. Okay.
However,
Oh, sorry, Philippe.
no, I just want to raise an issue about that. Actually, because they submit the questions to us, we can't hold them as confidential. So any candidate could do a PRA request and actually say, I want to see all the emails regarding the questions for the candidates.
I actually, I feel pretty strongly that we need to share them in advance, whichever ones we select, if nothing else, for the fact that if you've got 5 candidates, the person that goes first is disadvantaged versus the person that goes last. Because they have time to prepare, whereas that first person, unless we, keep them isolated and take them one at a time, I suppose. Since we're doing it digitally, I guess we could have a single person, in and then out. But, otherwise you're giving the advantage to the person that goes last.
Well, towards that, the meeting does need, the selection process does need to occur in open session. It's not a closed session matter. So that might be difficult to achieve. I do want to raise a question about our timeline. At our last meeting, we did establish a timeline for the selection to take place on June 25th, and we've incorporated that into the agenda. If we wish to have more than one meeting for the selection process, we can easily amend that. But depending where the conversation lands today, we'll need some direction on that.
What's the meeting following the June 25th meeting?
We would need to schedule that. We usually take a break from meetings in July, but following our first and third Thursday of the month schedule, that would be Thursday, July 2nd.
John, isn't it also entirely possible, given the state budget situation, that we may be meeting before the end of June, after the 25th and before the end of June anyway, on a budget matter?
Yes, there could be a series of special meetings scheduled, through the latter half of June and then to July. We could also schedule a special meeting with 24 hours notice at any point for the second part of a selection process to take place.
Could we schedule a regular meeting for the second step of the selection?
Yes, we could. We would need to post that at least 72 hours in advance.
Okay, so I think I would prefer just it be a regular meeting.
Sure.
Yeah, I think just keeping on a regular schedule, plan on meeting on July 2nd.
Are all
That works for me.
trustees available on July 2nd? Cindy, could you go around and see as to availability?
All right, Trustee Adams, are you available on the 2nd of July?
Yeah.
Trustee D'Annunzio?
I am indeed available on July 2nd.
Trustee Fernandez?
Yes.
And Trustee Poppingay?
Yes.
Okay, you got 4.
Very good.
The challenge, of course, is this will be after the end of Trustee Pickett's term.
Yes, so someone will have to run that meeting, not me.
Someone?
Joe?
Vice President D'Annunzio?
And I'm assuming we're meeting at the same time as always, right? 5 o'clock.
We would have closed session at 5 and open session would begin at 6:30.
Okay, very good.
So I wanted to go back to the process for how we winnow the group of applicants after the 3-minute presentations. And I wanted to throw out kind of ranked choice voting. And whether we could, because I remember last time there was this, I don't know, it seemed like a drawn out process. And I'm wondering if it would be more efficient to, after the presentations for the trustees to just rank them and then use those rankings to determine the final, 6. Thoughts? Trustee Poppingay.
Having gone through this when Madhavi left, I think it'd be good to try something different than we did last time. So, I mean, I think you're talking about a little different process than last time, as I recall.
Yeah, so it wouldn't be this back and forth. Basically, it would just be, each trustee ranks the presentation, ranks the applicants, and then those rankings determine who gets called back.
As opposed to multiple rounds of
Yes.
voting, which I think makes sense to me anyway.
Trustee Fernandez, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, what were you saying?
I would say the only difficulty is that it could, be difficult to do the rankings and make kind of, those, discriminations between them. But yeah. So anyway, that's the only thing I was going to add.
In some ways, there's no perfect way, but I think the process used last time, got us to a candidate. Are we suggesting something different, or the idea is just say, how do we, questioning what the best mechanism is?
Basically like what you guys did before, except that the rankings are already there. And so it's like an instant runoff. So, basically, if your first choice doesn't make it, then it goes to your second choice. And so there's just isn't the back and forth. And it's just, I don't know. I don't know how better, I don't know. I'm not describing it very well, but
Well, would it be, Cindy, would it be something along the lines of, so let's say we decide we want to move 5, 4, whatever the number is, let's just pick 5, to the second round of interviews. Would we each just rank our top 5, or and then?
no, you rank all of them. So you rank all of them, and then and then based on the rankings of all of them, the top 5 get determined.
Got it.
So,
Okay, so a single round, and just
Mhm.
numerically you add them up, and whoever the 5 with the lowest aggregate score move forward.
So can someone describe the process we used last time? Because I think the real problem last time was we had two excellent candidates and we had to go multiple rounds over which of the two.
Yeah,
Let me ask Bruce to log on and describe that after Trustee Fernandez's comment.
well, yeah, the only thing I was going to say is, if I recall, we didn't rank everyone. We just voted for 5, and then people who didn't get any votes, for example, just dropped off. The reason I like that is only or some version of that, and Bruce, of course, will correct or explain further. But all I was going to say is the reason I like that is because there's going to be a fair number of people that won't get a vote, and they're all treated equally. Whereas if we are all ranking everyone numerically, you're effectively articulating, you're the last priority for me, or you're the person who I think fits the least. And I feel like that's a little bit, these are people who are stepping forward to volunteer their time, and it's hard. Like, yeah, of all the people here, I would choose you the last or least, versus a fair number of people not getting any votes. It's kind of left to speculation of who was actually last place. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm just to build on that. I would feel terrible, like somebody who did step up and then they ranked 15th. Like you're so far from possible that feels a little bit much. I agree with you.
And these are always kind of trial runs for people who are interested in running in the fall. And I don't really want to discourage people from running in the fall just because they saw that 3 members really ranked them 18th out of 18. I don't want it, and I don't want someone also saying, well, I got ranked this, and then use it to their campaign advantage.
I think those are all valid points. I guess I'm just sort of curious to know, with 18, let's just assume 18 actually come in and present, how to winnow it down to, the top 5 or top 4, given the number of applicants.
So can we go to Bruce of what we did last time?
So what we do is, it's a process of elimination, right? And so what I've done in the past is, to try to look at the number of applicants and do, what's the reasonable, process of elimination to get it down to where at the end you're only voting for 2 or 3. And so if there's 18, you'd say, yeah, and because the issue is to try to eliminate rounds where there's lots of ties. So what I've done in the past is I model it and kind of look at it and say, what's the best process? So, and we have the ability to adapt if getting a lot of ties, saying how do we change the process a little bit to eliminate ties to whatever the source is. So I don't have an exact number, but I will look what we did last time, and if there's more, what we do is I would work and then say, hey, here's I think is the most efficient way to whittle it down. It might take 3, the more applicants, it might take more rounds to eliminate ties. And like say it was 18, you go from 18 down. You first take a vote to see if you get rid of, you say I'm going to do the first 10. Anybody that gets 0, see what that happens, right? And then you're down to 10, and then do the same thing where you whittle down from 10 to 5, and then you whittle down from 5 to 3. So the more that there are, it's it just means there's more rounds to whittle it down. Because if
I
you
think
don't
part of the concern I heard from trustees in the last time, and we modified, I think, live time, was the number of iterations it took. Is there a way to make that a more efficient process?
Yes, I think what I would look at last time is we kept getting, I'll look, because I had that all recorded. What we did is saying how we got so many ties and say, what is it easy? What did we learn from last time to where you don't have to do 5 rounds of a tie? You know, part of it, we're doing the 5 rounds of the tie is saying, okay, instead of trying to, I think the problem is we tried to go from 3 to 1, right? And it was better to go to 3 to 2 and then from 2 to 1. And so as you narrow it, I think the lessons learned is that, you know, when you have 3 and you're trying to get to 1, you have a lot more opportunity for there to be a tie. And so I will look at, you know, I had it all recorded to see how many ties we got last time and how we broke it, and just avoid the step that was making the ties.
But under that scenario, didn't we get like, we were limited to like 2 or 3 votes?
Yes.
And you didn't rank them, you just said, votes, you know, 1 goes to candidate A, 1 to candidate B, and 1 to candidate C.
Right. And so, and we did that by kind of testing and seeing, you know, which way with how many votes and depending on the votes in the tie. So the other question that we might do is say, you know, you only get 3 votes, right? So 2's to 3 out of the, you know, out of the 18. Well, and the question is saying, you know, how and we would take the top 5 or the top 10. And so we model that, how many votes do you get versus, you know, how many you're picking, and see what's the chances of that being a tie. And so I will look at where we had those, the votes versus the how many, and see where we were having tie problems and balance it out to the best product. Because I think when we changed it, you know, we eliminated the tying. And so I'll look back at our notes and see how we eliminate the ties at that point. It's just, you know, one of it's just the struggle that you have when you only have 4 people voting too.
If we're looking at a 2-meeting process, would the board like staff to bring back a process on either the 18th or the 25th in preparation for a July 2nd selection? Bruce could roll through what a proposed voting scenario is like, and that could be accepted, amended, or we could come back, you know, with a different model.
What we're describing is what would happen at the July 25th meeting or the June 25th meeting. So there's 2, yeah. So it'd have to be the 18th so bringing back on the 18th to describe the process that would happen on the 25th. And then I guess you would also need to know what the process is on the 2nd.
Yeah.
And could you put in there then an explicit timeline of when we would solicit community input in terms of questions to ask for the candidates?
Can I propose something on that? Which is,
Yes.
I would think we'd want those, you know, from the community in advance of the meeting on the 25th, so that we could agree on them and share them, you know, at that point, so that the candidates have time to prepare for them for the following week. So I'd want that input so that the candidates have some time.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
So that if you know you're one of the 4 or 5 finalists, you know what your prep is for the following week.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
All right, and how would the board like to winnow down or select the questions? As the whole board, via the subcommittee, or some other process?
Sorry, can you say that question again?
Sure. We can solicit questions from the community. And so we get a bank of 50 different questions. How would the board like to winnow that down to the actual questions that would be utilized? That could be done in open session. It could be done by the subcommittee, or we could hit upon some other method.
I think we do it in open session, but if staff could cull the questions together, or at least give us a raw count of what topics are mentioned the most. It doesn't mean we have to choose the one that's mentioned the most, but it gives us a sense of what was the recurring issue. And there might be some important question that this community doesn't ask that we still think needs to be asked at the second round.
All right. Would we like to review those questions on the 18th?
Well, I thought it's on the 25th. We actually have to review the questions that have been submitted, right?
Yeah, that would give us a much longer window to solicit those to the community, and I think we'd have better participation.
Right.
Yeah, I think the only challenge, I mean, it obviously depends, Tom, on how many questions we get. If we get 50 questions, and we're kind of reviewing them in open session, that might be, a little bit challenging. And then we're wordsmithing. So let me ask a couple questions for my colleagues. How many questions, so it's a two-parter, how many questions do we think we're going to, provide to the candidates? And are we asking them to, submit written responses to us, or are we saying, no, come and be prepared to answer them in open chambers, or some combination of the two? I mean, I'll throw out a posit. I think, we're looking in the neighborhood of 4, 5, 6 questions. I mean, it seems too many more than that. That's a kind of marathon session with 4 or 5 candidates.
Personally, I'd rather actually see them present their answers in via Zoom meeting as opposed to a written response. And I'm open with the number of questions. Probably, I agree with Joe. If you get much over 6, that's probably excessive.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And this is always something hard to control for, but when you do, I mean, I really like Bob's idea originally of trying to get, how do they respond without it being a rehearsed situation, right? Because I'm afraid on round 2, you give them 5 questions and they get up there and they're just reading their notes, right? And which is almost the same as a written response. So, I mean, I'm fine going with presentation, but I'm just wondering, are we going to allow ourselves also to do some follow-up questions after they present on the questions we ask them?
Yeah, I was just going to say that, every job interview, I do, you don't know the questions ahead of time. You try to prepare, your best ahead of time, but then you get the questions, they're cold. And I think there's a reason why it tends to be done that way. I think people think it's more diagnostic of kind of how they are really, thinking, as opposed to how much help they may have gotten in terms of preparing the questions or their answers. So anyway, I just wanted to add that note.
Yeah, if I could just comment on that, Cindy, I agree. Obviously at the university, I think in general, we do a pretty good job of creating consistent questions. And then, if you're a candidate, you have the general idea of what kinds of questions, but you don't know the specifics. But we ask the same questions of every candidate, and they're not in the room with each other. My real concern is one of equity, that if you're candidate number 5, you just have a big advantage by hearing the response to the first 4. You're not surprised. Even candidate 2 isn't surprised, and you just have time to prepare yourself.
We could you don't have that much time, but we could just randomize who goes first, so that advantage is spread across, or disadvantages, so you might be lucky to go first or last for one question, but that means you're first for another question.
So yeah, switch it by question. So not ask, all 5 questions of each candidate by candidate, but go question by question.
That's an interesting idea.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. So 5 questions, 5 candidates, everybody has the opportunity to go first and everybody has the opportunity to go last.
Mhm.
So maybe let me put this out there. Is there any benefit to giving them the questions, ask for a written response, and then the meeting is spent us doing follow-up questions to their response? Not hearing much excitement for that.
I think everyone's like silently pondering.
I think the challenge would be to be consistent amongst all the applicants in terms of what you're asking them.
Yeah, I may be going overboard on this, Tom, but I think it's really important that we treat everybody the same in terms of the interactions that we have with them.
The advantage of a written response to the questions going into the meeting is then everyone would see what candidates have, what they have written. I mean, I'm just putting that out there. I'm fine with, here's 5 questions, come to the meeting, be prepared to respond. Yeah. I was just trying to see if there was any advantage to that idea, so.
All right, so that seems like what we're kind of stuck on a little is just, do we give them the questions in advance or not? And then if so, how do we, so that's one issue, advance or not. And the second issue is how do we select those questions? From the large pool of other questions. And I would, for that second part, how do we, so all the trustees will have access to all of the questions that come in, but I do think maybe having the sub, committee of Joe and I propose a set of questions based on what's come in might be more efficient than trying to wordsmith at the meeting. And so then we're dealing with 5 questions, proposed questions to talk about at the meeting on the 25th.
Yeah, I'm in favor of that. I think it could get really unwieldy otherwise.
And also with the understanding, you could probably take what is a common issue and kind of boil it down into a well-stated question.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's great.
All right, and then, so then, I mean, the thing is, if we're discussing it publicly, then they're going to know the questions ahead of time. So that kind of
Right.
makes the other, point moot. So then, then everyone will have the questions, and then they'll come in on the 2nd, and you guys can hear their answers.
Okay, sounds good to me.
But Cindy, I still like the idea, even though they have them in advance, to give, to change the order of
Rotate.
who gets to go first. Yeah, because I really like that idea.
Okay.
Even though they're prepared, you could adjust. You could hear someone,
Yeah.
someone says, oh yeah, I agree with that. I have that same idea. It'd be nice just to have everybody have the opportunity to go first and last.
Right, and it'd be pretty easy with 5 questions, and let's say there's 5 candidates, you can mix up the order on who goes first on which question, right?
That sort of mimics some sort of town hall if you're running for election. You have a table of 5 candidates, and they sort of take turns answering the questions first, but they hear all the questions.
Yep.
All right, and as we get down into some of the more granular work, want to confer with the board right now. Are we best suited by the subcommittee and I conferring on, for example, when we, set a deadline for questions to come in for the community, those types of things.
Yeah, so, but what I'm hearing is, yeah, so that we can set it based on the input that we just got today about, making sure that there's adequate time.
Yep, I'll come up with a timeline, share that with the subcommittee, and we can make any adjustments necessary.
That sounds good.
Right, so, I guess, all right, so I guess we need a motion. Do we need a motion? I don't know, does someone want to make a motion based on this whole conversation?
Well, can we ask, John, what kind of guidance you have? And then let's just see if we actually need a motion.
Yeah, so let's tick off a couple of things. First, staff will notify the community that we are seeking questions to help fill the trustee vacancy through the interview and selection process, and we'll announce a deadline for that. We will, let's skip ahead, and we will set July 2nd as a tier 2 interview date. June 25th remains then as a time for candidates to make an initial presentation to the board. And that is also the date we can meet for anything related to the questions. So we will back the timeline for soliciting questions from the community from the 25th back to today and time that out. So there's enough window to message and give people an opportunity to think about their questions and submit them. Then I'll share those with the subcommittee, and we'll boil them down into some well-stated 5 questions that reflect the themes that have emerged from the larger set we've received.
And Bruce will work on, coming up with a voting mechanism based on the numbers of, applicants.
Yep. Very good.
Okay, so I think that captures it.
Very good. We can proceed with that. And I will amend the application to reflect the addition of the July 2nd meeting, get that posted to the website, and also notify the initial group of 18 of the revised application.
Okay,
great.
Do we need to act on the application since we're changing the date and process?
A motion to amend the application and establish July 2nd as a interview date I think that would be helpful for the process.
Okay, I'll move to add the additional date of July 2nd. Use of publicly based questions for the candidates.
All right.
Second.
Moved by
Sorry.
trustee Adams, second by trustee, sounded like D'Annunzio.
Yes.
Okay, all in favor by roll call vote. Adams,
Aye.
D'Annunzio,
Aye.
Hernandez,
Aye.
Hoppengate.
Aye.
All right, so we have 4 in favor, none opposed, and 1 abstaining.
As we get closer to, can we talk about the time that will occur? Depending on candidates, and we may want to move up the time earlier in the day, or just maybe an hour early. I don't know. I just would throw that out there.
You're talking about the 25th?
I'm talking about that. Okay. Or even the 25th
Okay.
as well. I don't know, actually.
You mean like an hour earlier?
Well, like, yeah, can we start closed session earlier so that we can move the open session, maybe by an hour? I don't know. Maybe it's fine. And I just don't want to have it be a very late. The 25th is going to be a long meeting probably anyways, but
Right.
That's a good point.
anyway.
Okay, so so we can consider that when we set the meeting time.
That's all. Cool.
Okay. So
But let's put a pin in that and return on the 18th.
mhm. So
Very good.
the date, time, and place of our next scheduled meeting is so our next meeting is scheduled for June 18th, 2020. We'll convene an open session and then immediately thereafter adjourn to closed session at 5. And then we'll reconvene an open session at approximately 6:30 and consistent with the shelter in place orders. The meeting will be by teleconference and in line with Executive Order N 2920. In-person attendance is not permitted, and people can submit public comment to boe@djusd.net. And that meeting will be streamed live on www.djusd.tv or Education Channel 17. All right, so we are now adjourned.
And we'll be recessing back into closed session at 12:15.
Okay, yes.